Meanwhile, more cross-border fighting in the Middle East, pushing oil prices higher today and spurring OPEC Plus to announce a monitoring meeting on the 1st of February. This follows Iranian reports of explosions at an event honoring one of its generals killed 4 years ago in a U.S. airstrike. State media reporting at least 103 people have been killed, calling it a terrorism attack. Lebanon's Hezbollah and Russia's Putin both condemning the incident, with Putin sending condolences to Iran. On top of all of it, Iran-backed Houthis attacked a 24th container ship on the Red Sea overnight. And my next guest says the U.S. will very likely decide to attack Houthi targets in Yemen in the next week or two. Here now is Amrita Sen. She's founder and director of research at Energy Aspects. And Amrita, welcome. Put that into context for us. How would the energy markets take it if those strikes do happen?
Look, I think so far as well, we've seen that with both the Red Sea and just generally geopolitics, we haven't seen prices react much, in part because fundamentals are softer for crude right now. We've seen some inventory builds towards year end, and that's why the market just isn't sensitive to this. Even if there are attacks, we're not expecting any oil supply losses on the back of it. And I think the market is going to really look for specific supply disruptions that actually helps tighten balances before we see a significant increase in prices.
And to that point, I guess the larger question is what it would signify for the Middle East more broadly. So we've seen this escalating tension even as the oil price has remained relatively calm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you could argue that, our oil prices just not reflecting some form of geopolitical risk premium. It isn't right now. And is that fair? I think the challenge we have right now is that crude demand seasonally is weaker because refineries undergo maintenance at this time. Product markets are tighter, and I think that's kind of where the imbalance is right now. But what we are likely to see, and once you kind of start to realize that inventories are still relatively low, especially versus this time last year. And if we start to get supply disruptions, then you are going to get the markets kind of paying more attention to these attacks in the Middle East. And you've already seen a lot of ships divert. It just means you're going to tie up shipping on much, much longer routes, which ultimately means Asia has to pay a higher price, consumers there. And it does affect inflation overall.
Yeah, another headwind for China, perhaps, or for the region. I'm curious, so if it's the case, as I saw an analyst put it earlier today, that the Houthis rule the Red Sea right now, what more is the international community going to have to do to get a passage back and normalize supply chains and help with oil prices and all the rest of it?
Well, I think it's a great question because we just haven't seen, even with U.S. carriers attacking and destroying some of these Houthi ships, that the counterattack, or rather the attacks from the Houthis, have stopped. If anything, they continue as well. So I'm not expecting a de-escalation in the Red Sea anytime soon. And I think that's where the real risk lies, is that right now the market's quite complacent to things. It has a lot of inventories, but these things don't take a lot of time to turn. And if you do get any kind of disruption, which is already causing quite a bit of diversion for these ships, we're just going to need prices to go up even further to actually reflect what then would mean a pretty significant tightening in balances. Again, I'm not saying it's happening right now, but there is a risk that that does happen.
And in fact, there was just a joint statement put out by the UK and 11 other countries saying we call for the immediate end of illegal Houthi attacks against commercial vessels transiting the Red Sea and the release of unlawfully detained vessels and crews, saying the Houthis will bear the responsibility of the consequences should they continue to threaten lives, the global economy, and free flow of commerce in the region's critical waterways. This is an extremely strongly worded statement, but statements aren't going to amount to much.
No, and exactly. And the point is that we have seen some of these Houthi carriers or boats being destroyed, and that hasn't deterred them whatsoever. And if anything, we are seeing continued attacks on vessels that are still going through the Red Sea. If anything, I think what you're going to see is more and more Western companies just saying, look, yes, we have to eat the cost, but we are just not willing to send our ships through that route. I think that is the real outcome right now, unless and until you see either a de-escalation or one way or the other, this kind of situation getting sorted out.